Hey, Wafters, Mr. Lasseter here. It says I can broadcast for up to 8 hours, but I feel kind of like death right now, and I probably look like it. That's why I put on the Santa hat to make me look cheery. Um, so we're gonna get started and hopefully um, do some good studying. Welcome to my humble abode, my library. We'll just kind of start with some questions. So we will keep the con puns to the minimum if I can contain myself. Yeah, let's do this thing. I left some of the review books that I usually look when y'all ask me the particularly hard questions. I left that at school, so I'll just make up the answers if we need, and hopefully it will not go poorly. Okay. Dibs, what you get the first question then. What do you need to know about Charlemagne? So as far as Charlemagne goes, kind of note him as an example of kind of an early attempt at an empire in Europe. Just kind of know his story in how it stands with the Franks, their contact with Muslims at the Battle of Tours with his grandfather. Charlemagne is really going to be the last time that Europe is somewhat united in a large empire, though very short-lived. He enacts some reforms of laws, builds up a large empire, becomes the Holy Roman Emperor, the defender of the Christian faith. Is crowned Holy Roman Emperor by the Pope. I don't remember which Pope. You'll have to look that up. And upon his death, I believe it's among his grandsons, his empire is divided up. And stays kind of split from then on out through the feudal era. So that's what I would say you need to know about him. What is Jati and Varna? So the Varna are the main castes that we see in the Indian caste system. It is like an order or class, and the Jati, the only thing you really need to know about that is that is the kind of subcastes. It's a very strict hierarchical system. And it's not just like the 5 big ones that we usually teach you in 9th grade of the caste system. There are a lot of subcastes. So if you see those terms, know to recognize them and know they have to do with the caste system. But other than that, you probably won't run into those terms too much. What topics should we exactly know from the time periods we haven't really studied? You don't have to know any of them. That is, there will be a few questions on the exam coming from later time periods. That's more of just a preview of practice to kind of give you an idea. I think you'll be able to figure out some of those. Some of those might end up being complete guesses. It's really to let me see how you are doing with your historical thinking skills. Can you use context that is given to you in the readings and what the kind of trends that you've looked at in class so far to figure out some of the more difficult stuff that you haven't seen. But in terms of, do you need to study anything or know anything for those? No, you do not at all. In fact, I wouldn't waste your time at all looking at anything past really the beginning of the Atlantic system that we've studied in Unit 4. You don't need to know all about European empires in the New World. That's not something that I'm required that you know. Let's see. Keep in mind, I'm going to be way behind your comments. So when I make jokes, it'll be timely for me, but not for you. How much do we know about signification in countries like Korea and Vietnam? I think it's always pertinent to know examples of attempted signification, successful and unsuccessful attempts at signification in not just Korea and Vietnam, but also Japan, especially in Japan, with the Taika reforms, which were attempted and then withdrawn. So just I would take a look at that signification work that I gave you and hand it back and study some of that. If you need to go back and want a little refresher on that, the reading is still in the PLP. So as long as you kind of know what signification is, it's more about the trend of the spread of culture and the spread of ideas. And China becomes so powerful that those ideas are going to spread to the regions around it. Let's say this is question number 42. Oh, that's close to the end of the test. I think it's E. E is the answer. How much of Europe is controlled by the Franks? Going back to my talk about Charlemagne. I don't know. Can I screen share at all on this? Let's find out. Give me a little bit of time to look up a map. How much of Europe is controlled by the Franks? Here's an image. Oh, that image is way too tiny. It'll be all right if I can screen share. Screen share your entire screen share. All right. Whoa, that's creepy. All right. This is a horrible map that I had to blow up to hopefully get you to see kind of the general size of the Frankish Empire. So this is France, Switzerland, parts of Germany up here at the top. So fairly large. You know, we're not talking about covering the entirety of Europe, but there were kind of tributary states on the outer edges. So I'll also look at geochron. All right. Am I going to come back? I did. All right. Very exciting. Sorry about like the trippiness of that. I don't know if it looked the same on your end. All right. So let's see. Charlemagne's Empire. If you look at like geochron, go to the year like 800 on geochron, give you a good idea. Can you brush up on Charles Martel since we are on the topic of Charles? I guess. Y'all are all really concerned about him. I don't even know if there's a question. I can't remember. Charles Martel, Frankish statesman, military leader, rules the Frankish Empire from like the late 600s, early 700s, and I mean that's pretty much it. He leads the army, leads the Franks against the Umayyads at the Battle of Tours. I think that's pretty much what you would need to know. I think that's pretty much the defining event of his rule. Let's see where we are now. Can you talk about the Delhi Sultanate? Sure, I can. Delhi Sultanate found in India. Excuse me. Your book has more reading on that because we just didn't have much time to go into it. It's based in kind of northern India. The Delhi Sultanate was, let me see what I can remember because I don't want to get confused with the Mughal dynasty. Let's see. It's around about beginning 1200-ish, I think. Let me go to our trusty book here to double check on my dates for that. I encourage you to do the same thing. It is very difficult to remember all these things. The Delhi Sultanate. Let's find out what else I think is important here. We're coming up to the Mughals, so again, I get these two confused a lot. So don't feel bad if you do the same thing. in this book. Thanks for putting up with the downtime, guys, of me flipping my book to this other page. Let's see. Delhi Sultanate, where are we at? Yeah, founded in 1206, so I was pretty much correct there. It lasts until about 1398 when Timur attacks Delhi, and the Delhi Sultanate goes into decline. One thing that's important to know about the Delhi Sultanate is that it was a Muslim-led kingdom in India, and India was predominantly Hindu at the time, so that's certainly important. What else should you need to know? The Sultanate grew to encompass most of India. They ruled through force. They pillaged. They taxed very heavily. The harsh treatment of Hindus by the Delhi Sultanate is going to be one of the reasons why they are like never accepted as leaders, and there's still going to be some discord, some intense dislike of Islam by many of the Hindus in India. Eventually they kind of fall to these rival states and invasions that come in. That's about the best I can do without telling you to go read the book, just because my Delhi Sultanate, I haven't brushed up on it. So really, really good, tough question for me. So thanks for putting up with my answer. Can you tell us about the succession of the Mughals? You have to be more specific, Happy Kid. What do you mean by the succession of the Mughals? And I can come back to that. Will those give us extra credit? I don't know what those means, but no, there probably won't be extra credit. Oh, so many con puns. In a brief summary, can you talk about the basic Reformation knowledge that we'll need to know? Sure. So the Protestant Reformation kicks off in the year 1516 with Martin Luther posting his 95 Theses to the door of a cathedral in Wittenberg, I believe, in Germany, or the Holy Roman Empire at the time. And in posting the 95 Theses, he may have done that. That's kind of like legend, but he did send a letter at least to a bishop about it. So he posts these theses, 95 things that the Catholic Church was doing wrong, or abuses of the church. Luther was an interesting guy. He was very racked up with this problem of like, how can you get to heaven? He was very much didn't think he was worthy of getting to heaven at all, and was concerned because he did not think he could be a good enough person. Just, you can't be good enough. The Catholic Church said that you needed to be faithful and to believe in God and Jesus and all that, and he thought he did. But then you also had to do good works, and he thought that people could not do enough good works to be worthy of salvation. So he's just kind of racked with this problem, and he arrives at what he thinks the answer is, and that it's not faith in good works, but faith alone by which people are saved and can go to heaven. And so he starts to preach this. He also has some problems with the Catholic Church and some of the practices, especially the selling of indulgences, or like little slips of paper that say, hey, you know that thing called purgatory? You don't have to spend as much time there if you buy this slip of paper from the Catholic Church. And they were being sold to raise tons of money to build cathedrals and fund individual bishops' pockets. And it was an abuse of the church. It was one that the Catholic Church in the Catholic Reformation does away with. They outlaw selling indulgences. But he has some other problems with the church. If you look at him from the standpoint of modern day Catholicism, they're pretty reasonable, actually. Not all of them, not all of them to the Catholic Church would be, but many of them. But at the time, in the 1500s, this was like something that you don't do. You don't challenge the Catholic Church. And so, of course, there's a big fight and he's excommunicated. But this is also a time where the church is declining in authority. It had been declining in authority for some time, especially during the Renaissance, and that had been for a number of reasons in events leading up to the Renaissance. But one thing that the church still got was tax money from local lands that the church owned. And so places that were very still close to the Pope, and it's in like southern Germany, they were not going to break away from the Catholic Church. They still felt like they had a say. But in Northern Europe, a lot of the local princes, especially in Northern Germany, felt no real connection to the Catholic Church, or no real loyalty. So they decided to break away and basically form their own churches, as people were starting to challenge the teachings of the Catholic Church. And so in breaking away, not only were they, saying that, maybe the Catholic Church has some things wrong and that can be reformed and made better. They were literally protesting many of the practices of the Catholic Church. Sorry about the screen, guys. It's being crazy. But in doing so, it was also a political act, breaking away and kind of forming your own religious political identity, which, by the way, when a prince would break away from the Catholic Church, or if it was, for example, the King of England breaking away from the Catholic Church to form the Anglican Church, you also, that person also would confiscate church lands. And so all the tax money that would go to the church instead was going to the state. And it was also a way to consolidate power. So Luther kicks off what in his eyes is a very religious battle, and ultimately morphs into a political fight. So you may be asking, well, how come the Catholic Church didn't put the kibosh on it? How come they didn't stop it? And they certainly tried very hard to stop it. But there had been a recent invention in Europe which allowed these writings of Luther to be get out there before, let's say, all his works can be burned to the stake, with him. He was protected, of course, by princes and the like in Northern Europe. So his works are starting to be printed in printing presses, which was the most recent the very recent invention that had come to Europe. And so before really the Catholic Church could get a lid on it and have a good response, his writings had been spread throughout Europe. The Bible had been translated out of Latin into the vernacular, whether it be German or English or French or whatever it is, that's going to contribute actually to literacy in Europe, because people are going to learn to read the Bible, similar to how Muslims would learn to read Arabic so they could read the Quran. So that will actually play a large role in the increase of literacy in Europe. But the Bible's out there in people's own languages, and so they can read it themselves and they can interpret it for themselves. So instead of going to church and hearing the reading from a priest and having the priest explain it to people, they are now, people in Europe are starting to read it for themselves and say, I don't think that means what the priest said it meant, or I might think this about it. So that might be in line with this Protestant church. Maybe I'll go over here and hear what the Calvinists have to say, or maybe I'll go and hear what the Lutherans have to say. That is the not so short of it. Okay, in the Protestant Reformation. What should we know about Turkic languages, if not much significance of Turkic people in state building? Yeah, so I guess we have just a few Turkic origin groups, one being the Delhi Sultanate I mentioned earlier. The Mamluks, I think, are important to remember. They were the the military arm of the Abbasid Caliphate for a long time, and then kind of rise to power and take over. Kind of through those means, the Abbasid Caliph stays in place, but the Mamluks run things for a time. The Seljuk Turks eventually take over a great deal of the Middle East, so look them up. And the Ottoman Turks really come on in about around 1450, and they conquer Constantinople in 1453, which freaks everybody in Europe out, of course, because this bastion of Christianity over in Constantinople, also a very important trade city for goods coming to Europe from the East. Well, that city has fallen to Muslims, and to the Europeans, that is a very scary thing. Of course, that'll be one of the things that spurs on the Portuguese and Spanish to look for other ways of getting goods from the East. What should you know about gunpowder empires? Pretty much what you read. We're going to talk about them a little bit more in Chapter 4, or Unit 4. The major gunpowder empires, the Ottomans, the Mughal Empire. Those I think are the two big ones that come up. There's a gunpowder empire in Persia as well. The Safavid Empire in Persia. Basically, we're just going to see those groups build they're land-based empires. They'll build large militaries with, like, cannons and guns and stuff. So that's where they get the name, kind of military empires. Last time Happy Kids screen shared, their laptop crashed. Wow. Okay. Well, I'm glad that I did not screw that up, because this is wow. Thanks for sharing that with me 10 minutes ago. Let's see. Oh, I lost our place. Be nice on these thingamawhatsits. I lost the place, guys. I don't really know where we are. I'm looking for it. Oh gosh. Oh, found it. All right, found it. Screenshot. Okay, crashed. Basically, France, West Germany, North Italy, and East Austria, Hungary. I don't know what that means. Oh, okay, I know what it means now. Can you give us an overview of the caliphates and/or feudalism? Ooh, vote now on your phones. No, I'll talk about both. The caliphates are basically the empires of the Islamic empires. Remember, a caliph is a successor. That's what the word khalifa means, is successor. And so the caliphs, or khalifas, were successors to Muhammad. He didn't actually name his own successor. And so the first four caliphs are known as the Rashidun Caliphate, or the rightly guided ones. They are kind of the first four after the Prophet Muhammad dies in 632 CE, and I can't remember all the names. Abu Bakr and Ali and a couple others. Anyways, so they continue the expansion of the Islamic Empire. So that's important to know. They actually kind of, I guess, create the Islamic Empire. When that caliphate comes to an end is when the family of Uthman comes to power. The Umayyad Caliphate rises, and basically, it's like a dynasty. If you think about it, the Caliphate as a dynasty, the Umayyad Caliphate continues to expand. It expands all the way into Spain, fights with the French, eventually collapses in 750 for a number of reasons. One, a lot of people did not think that the Umayyads were so much interested in Islam as they were interested in building a big empire and making a lot of money and living like this luxurious lifestyle. And so they're overthrown by the Abbasids. And the Abbasid Caliphate will last quite some time, something like 500 years, until the last Abbasid Caliphate is killed by the Mongols. Thanks, Mongols. But overall, the caliphates are, the Abbasids are known especially for continuing trade, expanding eastward along the Silk Road. They have that famous Battle of Talas with the Chinese. that kind of halts both groups, but the Abbasids kind of gain some influence in Central Asia, as does Islam gain influence in Central Asia. Then that's where we start to see the cultural exchanges taking place between the Tang dynasty of China and the Abbasid Caliphate of the Middle East. Feudalism as a whole, major causes: the fall of Rome, in the Viking invasions, and other invasions that come into Europe, Germanic invasions, etc., which make people kind of look more inward for protection. They basically flock to these warlords who the West likes to call like dukes and kings, etc., but they were warlords, basically. And a system takes place where you have people bound to the land, and they perform labor or pay taxes in exchange for protection. That protection is provided by a class of nobility or higher upper class people who own land, and they would protect the people for that loyalty or for that work. But they were also kind of hierarchically placed, because each noble, you had the king at the top, and then he would grant land to nobles, and those nobles might grant land to lesser nobles, their knights, their simple knights, or what have you, in exchange for them being loyal and going to war if asked. It was a very decentralized form of or way of life. But it was, these people in the feudal system were very intent on being self-sufficient, because trade just breaks down in Europe without an overall government, an overarching government to regulate trade or issue currency. The feudal system, I mean, we see lots of bartering taking place in feudalism, but without the government there to implement those frameworks for trade and for keeping up roads and building those infrastructures and keeping peace, this decentralized state kind of takes its place. Are the same number of questions for each time period, or just one time period? Do any time periods have more? Let me look. I wonder if I don't know if I brought my stuff with me. No, I don't think I have a list on my answer key of what objectives and key concepts each question goes with. I think it'll be pretty much even split between 2, 3, and probably more so evenly split between 2 and 3. Of course, you'll have fewer questions with Unit 1. It's only 5%. I think I only really have maybe one stimulus from Unit 1. And then it'll probably be a little bit lighter on Unit 4. Well, I can't promise that. Maybe a little bit lighter. I can't remember, to be honest. I think it's a little bit lighter on Unit 4 because we just haven't covered as much. Oh, happy Halloween, Diane. What should we know about the Renaissance and Protestant Reformation? I've talked a lot about the Protestant Reformation. The Renaissance, literally, I think it's a French word for rebirth. It's a time when Europe kind of rediscovers their classical past of Greece and Rome. They also rediscover art, and this for a number of reasons. If you recall, the Crusades reintroduced a lot of what had been Western culture to Europe. Europe also gets a taste for what life is like in the Middle East. It's pretty sweet compared to what it's like in Europe around the year 1100 when the Crusades begin. People live comfortable lives. There's like some semblance of mathematics and medicine and reading and studying philosophy and enjoying life, as opposed to like just, trying to eke out a living, which might be, it's an oversimplification, but you kind of get what I'm saying. Plus Europeans go to the Middle East and they like taste food that tastes not horrible. And they're like, ooh, what'd you put in this? Oh, spices? That sounds wonderful. Where can we get some of these spices? And the Middle Easterners just point further east and then say, they come from that way and you can get them through us if you trade. And so the Italians really kick off the trade, and coincidentally, because of their involvement in trade, as well as their geographic location, their willingness to trade with the Middle East, their mastery of ships in the Indian Ocean or in the Mediterranean Sea. The fact they're looking at Roman ruins all around them, this curiosity. The Renaissance begins in Italy. Of course, we think of it as a cultural flowering, a lot of art and philosophy and stuff happening, and that is 100% true. That certainly happens. That can't happen in a vacuum though. Art needs money, and one of the reasons it starts in Italy and then the Northern Renaissance starts in Belgium is because there are large cities where trade is happening, where manufacturing is happening, and there's a lot of wealth, especially wealth among the merchant classes in those places. And so they start to, spend their extra money on building nice buildings, or just paying artists, being patrons of the arts. Hey, Leonardo da Vinci, paint me something or build me something, or Michelangelo, can you sculpt me something? So just expendable income, that helps too. Anything about the Vedic age that we should know about? All right, kind of know how the Vedic age leads to Hinduism. You have these Vedic texts, and those will, like anything else we see in culture, religion also kind of evolves and transforms. And so the Vedas end up transforming kind of into and being incorporated into modern Hinduism. Colin Kang, let's check the textbook real quick. All right, troll hard. All right. Yeah, everyone click subscribe down below if there is a button for it. I don't know. What topics should we know most about, or should be asking me about, or can I expand more on that? Oh gosh. What do you need to know more about? Trade. You always need to know about trade. So a good way of reviewing might be to make like a super chart tonight where you put all our trade routes. If I'm listing trade routes, I'm thinking about are the Mediterranean, the Indian Ocean, trans-Saharan trade, Silk Roads. Those are the four big ones. Oh, and I guess the Atlantic system. And then, or maybe some trade routes in the Americas as well. You can go back to your notes on that. And then maybe make just like a chart, like what goods were traded. Were there any major events? What empires were in those regions, and when were they? When were the heights of those trade routes? If I'm thinking about the Mediterranean, I definitely know there's a height during the Roman Empire. It reaches, first probably among the Phoenicians, and then later the Greeks, and then the Romans. Then maybe the Byzantines and Muslims, and then the Italians, the Venetian city-states. The trans-Saharan trade comes along much later. Remember, it gets started very slowly. It's really aided by the invention of the camel saddle. I know y'all are sick of hearing me say that, but it really helps overcome that barrier. Also aided by the rise of Islam and the connections made between sub-Saharan Africa, especially those empires in West Africa, the Muslim empires, and the Muslims of North Africa. Main goods that are traded, salt from the north going south in exchange for gold, ivory, and slaves. Indian Ocean always kind of keeps on the up and up. I mean, almost a constant upward trajectory. It's never dominated by any empire, single empire, really, until the Portuguese come in, and they don't have a total monopoly on it. But we talked about that a couple weeks ago. Still very important. The development of a lot of cosmopolitan cities, whether it be in the Swahili coast, the Swahili city-states, whether it be on the Malabar coast of India, whether it be in Southeast Asia and places like Malacca. So that's something to keep in mind. Silk Road is one that is probably a little bit more complicated because it has several heights. the classical era, when the Han and Romans are on either end, with the Parthians in the middle. Trade occurs. When the classical empires decline, so does the Silk Road. In the post-classical era, when Islam and the Abbasid Caliphate rise, and the Tang dynasty of China rises, it reaches another peak. It reaches its absolute height under the Mongol Empire and the Pax Mongolica, and will kind of decline after that, and will certainly decline when trade kind of bypasses the Silk Road, and Europeans start sailing around Africa, and even the Spanish start moving goods across the Pacific, and the Chinese kind of become much more insular. So that would be kind of the big stuff. Pretty much for most of its history, the same goods are traded along the Silk Road. So I think that's pretty much that. I think in the reading I gave you on the Americas, there was a chart in there that looked at, and I don't have the book in front of me to show you, but there was a chart in there that looked at different trade routes in the Americas, as well as in Afro-Eurasia. And I believe it had some pretty good examples of items traded. All right, I went for a while there. Can you tell us about the significance of the different khans so we don't get too confused on tests? So you know what they did. Mean about the Mughals and what they were all about after replacing the Delhi Sultanate, I guess. Well, again, the Mughal Empire, we're really going to be studying a lot more in this unit. So I would say, go back and look at your book and see what you got there, but I wouldn't be too concerned about that on the test. I think you'll be able to figure out anything that's asked. As far as the khans, if we're thinking about the Khan as a ruler, Genghis Khan you need to know, and Kublai Khan they're probably the two main ones. Genghis Khan, because you need to know, how he established kind of unity among the Mongols, and he kind of kicks off that period of expansion. The Kublai Khan, he starts the Yuan dynasty. They're probably the two most important. What's the most important we need to focus on for Unit 2? Oh gosh, that's not a very specific question. Most important point for Unit 2. Unit 2 is 600 to 600. Empires rose in that time period. They eventually fell. There you go. That's a big point in Unit 2. I think that would solve it. I'd have to pull up the key concepts to see what's the most important. Trade flourished. We see an expansion of interregional trade. But yeah, empires rose and fall in the time period. They developed new ways of governing. Just think about the rise of the Qin with legalism, and then the Han dynasty incorporating Confucianism, and establishing civil service exams and developing a large bureaucracy. That's kind of a new way of governing. The Romans with their bureaucracy, new way of governing. So I guess that's what I would say about that. View of Persian Empire and impact on religion and future empires. Persia. So Persia kind of goes through a lot of different iterations. The one I focused on was the Achaemenid Empire. Cyrus the Great establishes it, unites much of the Middle East and modern-day Iran under one government. Really reaches its height under Darius and Xerxes, who continued to expand. Also, they build the city of Persepolis, which was the ceremonial capital. Zoroastrianism plays an important role in Persia at the time. But Persians are still tolerant of other religions, which I think is one of the things we see in really our successful empires, is a tolerance for many different religions. The Uh, Persians developed the qanat system. That's something important in terms of interactions with the environment, which allows them to grow much more. Certainly to grow cotton later on when it's transported from India to Persia, it becomes an important crop. The qanat system actually spreads pretty far and wide. It's even used in some places in China. It spreads that far. Other important things about the Persians: fight wars with Greece and lose. Yeah, I mean they still kind of stay around for a while. Let's see. Please fill us in on the encomienda system. Okay. Again, that's something we're going to be talking about a little bit more. It's going to be a labor system that is implemented by the Spanish in the Americas. And it's a very harsh labor system. Basically, it was a way to control Native American labor or Amerindian labor in Mexico and Central America. It's eventually outlawed by Spain because the treatment is just extremely harsh. But it was basically people would go in and conquer, and they would be rewarded with land and labor of particular groups. And it had been used in Spain and then was implemented in when people would conquer regions that that Muslims had controlled. So they'd be rewarded with like people working for them in Spain. Then it's used in the Americas by the Spanish. And basically the conquered peoples were under control of the Spanish crown. And it was extremely harsh. People would be moved, basically near slavery. People would be enslaved. Family units, people would be broken up. It's actually fought against by some of the Spanish religious priests in Mesoamerica. Again, we really haven't gotten totally into that. I'll talk about that more next semester. And you'll read about it more and learn about it more. Let's see. Noticing our watch numbers, 25 people watching right now. That's like half our class, or just a lot of randos. The printing press. I don't know if that's an explanation, if you want me to talk about it. The significance of the Sassanids and the Umayyads. I talked a little bit about the Umayyads already when I'm done. The Sassanids were basically like the Neo-Persian Empire. It was just like a reconstitution of the Persian Empire. And it lasted from like the year 200 to 600-ish until it is conquered by the Umayyads, I think. You may have to look that up to see who conquered it, whether it was the Umayyads or the Abbasids. But they are eventually conquered. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I didn't really go much into them when we talk about them much because I spent, again, more time on the Achaemenid Empire as our exemplar for Persian empires. Let's see. Most important key terms to keep in mind in terms of the Americas. Ooh, good question. So, what are some of the important, vocabulary terms to recognize outside of me saying to you, like, know all the different groups, know the, the Olmec and the Chavin and the Teotihuacan and, Toltecs and Aztecs and all that, Mayans, of course. Inca, certainly like know those groups and generally where they were. I would say two of the important things to know are the types of agriculture found, the Chinampa system found in pretty much Mexico and the region where the Aztecs were, where they would build up like dirt in the middle of swamps and they plant on top of it. Know that waru agriculture, just two warus, W-A-R-U, W-A-R-U, was used in the Andean region of South America. It's almost the opposite: dig holes, let water settle in the bottom, and plant there. And those are just ways that people overcame environmental barriers in order to farm, in order to bring water to the crops needed to grow food. Other terms, the Mita system used by the Inca. That'll come up later as we talk about labor systems, not just the encomienda, but the Mita as it was used by the Spanish in South America. That'll come up more next semester when we talk about the Spanish Empire. Other terms. Let me see if I can look through the key concepts real quick and just see if I can identify any major ones right off the bat. Let's see. Oh no, certain cities like Tenochtitlan, Cahokia, I think those are important cities that you need to know from the Americas. Know the terms like Mesoamerica referring to the Middle America, between basically south of the United States and north of South America. Central America and what that refers to, south of Mexico, north of South America, where the Caribbean is and all that kind of jazz. Know where the Andes Mountains are and what they are. I think that'd be important. Other examples, know about like currency used in Mesoamerica. We see cocoa beans being used as kind of de facto currency, DE space FACTO, de facto currency. Other than that, those are the big terms, I think. I'm literally just scrolling through the key concepts. I do not think it's a bad idea, guys, to go back and just give the key concepts a read through. It's like it's like 20 pages or so, but it's not a bad idea to at least scan through them and look back through them to see if there's anything that you're not sure about. Okay. I don't get some of these jokes. All right, I think I am done with all the questions. Oh wait, more comments below. Nope, I think I'm caught up. Unless it jumped to the bottom again. Nope, all right, I missed some. All right, give me a second. Scrolling back up. This is very difficult. Let's see. So Lasseter has been here for 20 minutes, longer than that actually. Somebody can't see me. Oh, that's sad. Okay, well I hope it's working, because that'll bother me if it's not. I feel like I'm wasting a lot of time just trying to find questions. Oh, important dates we need to know about. Okay, so if you think about dates that you need to know, oh gosh, in this course, I don't know, like around 8000 BC we learned to farm. So we'll start there. Shoot, I'm sure there's like a video online that you can look up of like important dates in history. Shoot, I think the 12 tables of the Roman Empire is around the year 509 BCE. Get started. Other like reference dates, the Qin dynasty begins around like 220 BCE. The Han Dynasty goes from about the year 200 BCE to about 200 CE. The Roman Empire lasts from about 500-ish BCE to 476 CE. Islam begins in the year around the year 600. The Islamic calendar begins in the year 622 CE, although the first revelations that Muhammad receives are in 610 CE. The Battle of Tours in 732. The Battle of Talas is between the Abbasids and the Tang Dynasty of China occurs in the year 751. The schism between the Eastern and Western Christian churches is in the year 1054. The First Crusade is called in the year 1095, kicking off the hundreds of years of war off and on between Europe and the Middle East. Let's see what else we got. Excuse me. The Constantinople falls in 1453. Columbus sails the ocean blue in 1492. I think that's the big ones. I will keep thinking about more if I can remember them. Dates will be given to you in questions. Let me also say that the readings that you get in a question usually will have a date. Maps will usually have dates on them. The question will give you a timetable. So knowing that you're never gonna have a question that says, what date did something happen? But especially when you're writing, if you're giving a time frame, you need to know generally what occurred within that time frame. We'll spend a lot of time at the end of the year really working on that, making sure that the events that we remember happened when they happened. It's never a bad idea to kind of get started and think about, what were the major empires in each time period, though. What were luxury items or necessities traded in cities connected by the Grand Canal in China? Excuse me. The luxury items we see traded, well, certainly spices are coming into China, into southern China, and being brought northward. Silk is being traded from northern China to southern China and out into the Indian Ocean. Porcelain becomes a major thing traded. Porcelain had, I may be getting this backwards. Check AP Worldopedia for this, but I remember reading porcelain was originally made in northern China, but it turns out that the soil in southern China was really good for making the type of clay, or the clay that was found in southern China was really good for making porcelain. So I think that's something that's production of porcelain is going to go up. What was the Royal Road and what was traded on it? The Royal Road is found in Persia. It's the road built to kind of promote trade across the Persian Empire. And it is a really good example of one of our early kind of state building infrastructure to assist the movement of troops and goods for an empire. Of course, the Romans are going to do the same thing. The Han are going to do the same thing. The Inca are going to do the same thing. Explain Roman equites, the 12 tables, and the Roman manners, please. Well, good to see that you have Roman manners as well. The equites were a class of people in Rome. They were not like the upper class. They weren't like the richest, but they were kind of like that second group of rich people where it was like, maybe not the upper 1%, but the top 5%. And the equites are important because when Augustus Caesar comes to power, or Octavian as he was known, he pretty much aligns himself with that second class. He knows that he might not get the Senate on his side, but he can get that class of equites on his side, and therefore he can he'll know that he can fund his government and that he will have the support. Of course, the equites certainly outnumber the uppermost classes. Before that, way before that, Rome developed a kind of a written law system of the 12 tables. And so the 12 tables that we are they kind of established the one of the earliest law codes for the Romans. It was the earliest attempt by the Romans to establish those law codes. So it basically set up the Roman system of government. The patricians and plebeians both kind of agreed to it. They would elect consuls to enforce them. They were written on like these bronze tablets, etc. And so they're going to be kind of the early law codes of the Romans. That's kind of what you need to know. Just thinking in terms of like, with new empire, with new land, new forms of government come up, and new sets of laws are developed as well. The Roman manor system, I think you're probably referring to latifundia, which are kind of like large. When Rome would conquer a place, these like what they conquered would be given to the rich, and so you get these massive estates, and there wouldn't be quite as much land for everyone else, and so we start to see distancing of the upper and lower classes in Rome, which will lead to some problems down the line, certainly for the Roman Republic and again for the Roman Empire later on. Can you show us an answer key so we can use this study guide? It'd be very helpful. Yeah, sure. At the end of the video, that's what you get. Sorry you have to like watch me drink. But I may die if I don't have something to drink. I'm trying to keep liquids in me. Third century crisis. The third century crisis was in Rome. Basically, things aren't going so well. They have like emperors rising to power in Rome. Comes to an end, I want to say with Constantine before him. So I would say look it up. But the Roman Empire basically nearly collapses. They're coming under pressure. There's invasions. There's civil war within Rome. There's a plague that hits. There's economic depression. And so everything kind of hits the fan, so to speak. And it comes to an end, not with Constantine, because that's too late. Diocletian's reforms. Diocletian makes the reforms. Do I think you're going to question like whose reforms ended the third century crisis? No, but you might get you could always see on an AP exam perhaps a reading about the reforms of Diocletian, and it may say, you may have to say, what kind of events led to that or the like. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw something along those lines. Can we review how to write the SAQs and how much harder will this test be than the unit test? I think this test might actually be easier than the unit test, as I keep saying, because it's all based on stimuli. It's not like my test where some are based on stimuli and it might be one stimulus and one question about it. But it'll be one stimulus and maybe 3 or 4 questions related to that stimulus. So you'll kind of have your brain working in the same direction. You won't have to shift gears as much. So in that sense, I think it'll be easier. I also think it'll be easier because, it can only ask really big trends that take place. So you're going to have to take what you know and kind of apply it. And in that case, maybe it'll be harder. In terms of how to write SAQs, you'll write the SAQ on Friday. Answer all parts of the question. Be sure to explain. That's the one thing that we're kind of having the most trouble with. If we're having trouble in SAQs, you'll give a piece of evidence, but you won't explain how it answers the question. Not you specifically, the person asking that question, but just in general as a class. We're assuming that I will know what you're talking about instead of telling me what you mean. You don't need a thesis for SAQs. You just jump in and answer the question. It'll be in different parts. It'll be an A and B part or an A, B, C, along those lines, and you need to answer it in that order. So that would be what I would say. A minute or two to plan your answer, and then no more than 10 minutes writing. Let's see. Anything new? Anything to know about Nestorian Christianity? An example. That's another example of a religion that spreads along trade routes. Again, if that's a very specific example, but it exhibits a larger trend. Nestorian Christianity was deemed heretical by the Christian Church of Europe, and so the people who believe in Nestorian Christianity must kind of flee away, and they go eastward along the Silk Road, traveling between towns and spreading Christianity as far away as China. Just another really good example of religion spreading wherever trade spreads. Let's push for 1 million subs. I'm all for it, guys. I can start making some money on these videos. I'll share probably not much of it with you guys. Sorry. What should we know about silver during the Age of Exploration? It funded the Age of Exploration. Silver is found by the Spanish in South America. Again, we're going to talk a lot more about this later on. You will be thinking about it a lot, I'm sure, over break. But silver is what's going to fund it's going to fund trade worldwide. The global trade that we were talking about is paid for by the Spanish peso de ocho, right? It's funded by the Spanish minted coins that are used all around the world. China loves them, India loves them, Europe loves them. So that coin will really become a worldwide global currency. The first time we really see a global currency develop. Important Chinese cities and their roles. Oh gosh, Chang'an, the capital of China for some time. Hangzhou in southern China is an important port city. We're gonna have more other important Chinese cities as we'll come to it. I think those will be the main ones that you would see. All right, we're getting close to the end here. It's 9 o'clock, so I'm gonna just look through these. Important labor systems, changes made by other countries or empires. I don't know what you mean by that second part of changes made by other countries or empires, Maya. So you may wanna type that in real quick at the bottom and I can get to it. Important labor systems. So in terms of thinking about labor systems, think about how governments got organized labor. Did they allow slavery, for example? Most early forms of slavery is not hereditary. Conquered peoples enter into slavery and then their children are not born as slaves. That will change certainly when the Europeans get involved and realize that it's more economical to make slave hereditary. Some governments organize labor for large projects through corvée labor, basically labor as a tax. This is something that we see not just in China, but in other places. Certainly we do see it in China. Feudal labor, the use of serfdom would be a good example of a labor system you need to know. In the Americas, the Mita system of the Inca. And then we're going to come up to a lot more in this unit, whether it be hereditary slavery or chattel slavery. What we usually think of first when we think of slavery, because it was what was present in the United States and led to the Civil War. The encomienda system that the Spanish Empire uses, they also use a version of the Mita in South America. So those are the big ones. Oh, and of course, indentured servitude, which I completely forgot to mention, but we'll get to it in this unit as well. That will be used. Indentured servitude will have a heyday, and then people will realize that it sucks to be an indentured servant. So Europeans will, realizing they can't convince people to be indentured servants, will turn to full-on like hereditary chattel slavery. And then when slavery is outlawed, because Europeans eventually realize it's like the worst thing that you can do, they'll turn back to indentured servitude, and especially the British Empire will facilitate the movement of indentured servants around the world. All right. Let's see. We go to the examples of patriarchy shown in empires. Patriarchy. Pretty much every empire is patriarchal in this time. Some major examples of patriarchy that we see that I would not be surprised if they popped up on a test. Primogeniture in Europe, land passing to the oldest son. Treatment of women in Athens, treatment of women in the Roman Empire, the practice of foot binding in China, especially in the Song dynasty when Neo-Confucianism comes around and we see kind of a renewed form of patriarchy. Confucianism in general in the Han dynasty and pretty much every dynasty of China. Individual practices, cultural practices like sati, in India, veiling of women in the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic caliphates. All of those are examples that you could pull in of patriarchy. All right, take a couple more questions. Does every question have a stimuli? Stimulus would be the singular, but yes, there are a lot of stimuli in the questions. So that you'll have a reading or a map or an image. And you'll have between 2 and 5 questions that go with that map, image, or reading. There will never, on this test, you will have a reading with at least 2 questions or more accompanying it. It will not be like a reading and 1 question and then another reading. So the questions will tend to build on each other for this test. I missed some info. I don't know what happened. What form of Christianity did Kievan Rus convert to? Was it Nestorian or Orthodox? Orthodox Christianity. So then the Russians will convert to what will become Russian Orthodox, but it's very much connected with the Eastern Orthodox Church. And that is one reason why Russia really develops more an Eastern mindset than maybe what you might see as a Western mindset or something connected to Western Europe. And that's connected to their trade. Their trade was connected to the city of Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire. It's also connected to the development of the Cyrillic alphabet by Cyril and somebody else who developed an alphabet to help spread Christianity into the region. Does Nestorian Christians went to oasis towns along the Silk Road count as evidence? Yes, that is evidence, but you would need to explain it more. I probably should have explained it more. It would also depend on the question on how I would explain it. How much do you need to know about American trade systems? Know some examples of what are traded. Know that all trade in the Americas was done, well, not all trade, because the Incan Empire notwithstanding, Mesoamerica and North America, trade was done without beasts of burden. So that's going to limit what is traded, high value, low weight items mainly. In South America, they have the llama and the alpaca as beasts of burden, and they have a vast road network that encourages trade. Didn't the Spanish come in and alter and use the Mita system to their benefit? Yes, the Spanish do come in and alter the Mita system, primarily in the mining of silver in South America. That's where we see them use the Mita system. So that would be the example. Now, the encomienda system that Enrico has mentioned here is used primarily in like Spanish Mexico and Spanish Central America and the Caribbean. Words of encouragement. Yeah, don't throw away your shot. Listen to the Hamilton soundtrack, not like all of the second disc, but part 1 of the Hamilton soundtrack where Alexander is like, things are getting better for him. Listen to that. That'll really pump you up for the test. that would be my encouragement. What should we know about Neo-Confucianism? Know why Neo-Confucianism developed. It's kind of a reaction to the influence of Buddhism in China. Yes, Kirby, listen to the mixtape, particularly a song with Ja Rule on it, because it's the best. So anyways, back to Neo-Confucianism. Buddhism was taking a major hold in the Tang dynasty of China, and it was supplanting some Chinese developed belief systems, Taoism, Confucianism, and that did not sit well with the Chinese and the Tang dynasty. So they start to suppress Buddhism, and there starts to be a reemergence of Confucian philosophy and the importance of Confucianism. That Neo-Confucianism will roll over into the Song dynasty of China and become a major part of the reestablishment of Confucianism as kind of like the preeminent philosophy of China, and it will also spread to places like Japan around the same time. Okie doke. I think that's pretty much it. Anything to know about American civilizations like Olmec, Toltec, Moche, Chavin? Yeah, take a look at them. There's a reading. If you just go back and you want to know about them, pretty much everything that's in the reading on that stuff in the PLP or the PowerPoints that you guys made, that'll have everything that you would need to know about those. Major thing in mind with religion in Africa. Oh, up to this point in Africa, Islam is really kind of spread to West Africa and Northern Africa, of course, to Northern Africa, but it had spread to West Africa. With Christianity, as Christian Europe starts to explore the African coast, Christianity will take hold in some port cities in sub-Saharan Africa. For example, the Kingdom of Congo. Certainly, there had been Christians in Ethiopia for thousands of years, so that there's that kind of little enclave, but the rest is pretty much traditional religions. Christianity will not make inroads in Africa until the 1800s, only in port cities, really. Islam will really have the biggest impact up until that time. All right, guys, that's it. I'm gonna sign off. It seems that our questions have kind of dried up, and some people have dropped. We're down to 22 watching now, so y'all must be getting bored. I'll see you tomorrow. 45 multiple choice questions in 45 minutes. That's pretty much it. Hang on in just a second. I'll give you all the answers to the test.